Just
Good. It's going in Facebook Live. I see the sign pop up on my screen, live on Facebook. By the way, Salma and Greg and Omar, this is the first time I'm going to Facebook Live. Probably
Okay,
big
good.
channel.
I think we all are all getting used to the Zoom and the Facebook Lives a lot.
Okay. Go ahead. Wait.
Hey, you can start anytime.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Salma Zahid, your Member of Parliament for Scarborough Centre. I'm here with our weekly Facebook Live. Today, the topic of discussion is systemic racism and what actions we need to take going forward. And I have three very special guests. I will introduce our special guests for tonight. We have Greg Fergus. Greg is the Member of Parliament from Quebec and is also the chair of Canadian Caucus of Black Parliamentarians. Thank you, Greg, for joining us today, and thanks a lot for your important work which you have done in the Parliament and for all communities across Canada. We have
to be here.
Thank you. We also have Pastor Melvin McGann, the pastor from Meadowvale East Apostolic Church, located right here in Scarborough Centre. Pastor McGann has been associated with the church and has been serving the community of Scarborough Centre for many years. Thank you, Pastor, for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing from you tonight.
Thank you for inviting me. As the first time I've been in a forum like this, so I'm looking forward to it. A bit nervous. Not be exposed to politicians up in Ottawa. So I probably need to just run around the room to get my comfort level. But I'm happy and I appreciate that you've invited me, Salma, and nice to meet Greg and Omar.
Thank you, Pastor. And we have Omer Mumish, a high school student going into grade 11 in the fall and local resident of Scarborough Centre and great advocate about human rights and building a more inclusive community here in Scarborough. So thank you, Umar, for all the work which you do, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I'll just give a little brief update as every week on some of the important announcements which have been done by the federal government. So last Friday, our Prime Minister made some announcements in regards to the Canadians living with disabilities. Canadians living with disabilities are facing significant challenges due to the COVID-19 situation. Some are experiencing job insecurity, while others are seeing increased cost for personal support workers, medications and medical supplies. As we all work together to restart our economy, we must continue to protect the health and safety of all Canadians and ensure that right supports are in place for every Canadian. So that's why the Prime Minister announced last Friday a special one-time tax-free payment of up to $600 to all individuals who are certificate holders of the disability tax credit. We hope to have more details on this program very soon. We have also announced this week an exemption to the essential travel requirements for immediate family members of Canadian citizens and permanent residents who are Islamic and seeking entry into Canada for a minimum of 15 days. Public health requirements such as mandatory 14-day quarantine will remain in place for all those individuals coming in. An immediate family member refers to a person's spouse, common law partner, dependent child, parent or a step-parent, or the parent or step-parent of the person's spouse or common law partner, the guardian or the tutor of the person. So this exemption does not extend to immediate family members who are here in Canada on a temporary resident visa, such as international students, and they still need to be legally eligible to travel to Canada. So if you are a Scarborough resident, you can contact our office for more information on this. So this is just to unite families. If you are a Scarborough business looking to purchase some personal protective equipment, as we all begin to reopen, we have launched the Federal Supply Hub to bring together available resources for organizations buying and selling PPEs. The Supply Hub will connect the Canadian organizations from coast to coast to coast with federal, provincial, territorial, and other resources and information about the PPEs, including consumer guidance. This link is available on my Facebook page, or you can contact our office through phone or email if you need any further information on that. So with this, I will end my update and provide opportunity to our guests today to introduce themselves and give their opening remarks. So we will start with the MP, Greg Fergus. Greg, floor is yours. And if you...
Well, thank you very much, Zaman. I really do appreciate being here and being with your constituents to talk about an uncomfortable conversation that we're going to have about systemic discrimination, about what's been happening over the last few weeks, to talk about anti-Black racism and how we can work together to try to create a more generous and more inclusive Canada. I think all of these, a lot of this discussion has really pushed itself onto the public, into the public's mind as a result of a couple of live to tape deaths that we saw coming out of the United States. And we saw what happens when, how damaging is racism. Racism kills. And it sends a whole bunch of messages, none of them positive, to people of color, not only in the United States, but of course around the world. We can spend a lot of time talking about what is working or what might not be working south of the border. But what this discussion has done is that it's really forced us to think about what's happening here. To take a look at, where we fall short of our ideals as Canadians, to recognize the existence of racism, the existence of systemic discrimination, to the existence of anti-Black racism. But you can take out the words anti-Black and you can insert so many other names, whether it is a sexism, whether it's Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, issues on gender orientation and the like. These are the things which, as Canadians, we know that we could do better. We know that we have to do better. So if out of the horrible deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and of course George Floyd, if we can take advantage of this opportunity to do what you're doing here in Scarborough Centre, to have a frank conversation about what is systemic discrimination and how we can fight it and how we can build an inclusive Canada, well then I think then we're turning an awful situation into something positive.
Thank you, Greg, and we look forward to good conversation tonight on systemic racism and what steps we can take. Now we will ask Pastor Melvin McGann to please say a few words.
Thank you, Zalma, and thank you, Greg. My words may be longer. I actually wrote something I want to speak about. So if you could bear with me, hopefully I'll get to as quick as possible. Zalma, I really appreciate how supportive you are of all the causes in our writing. I want to extend our appreciation from Meadowvale East Church for what you've done for us and also in our writing. Racism is an ideology. I'm quoting from from the Ontario Human Rights Commission is ideology, either directly or indirectly, that asserts that one group is inherently superior to another. It can be openly displayed in racial jokes and slurs or hate crimes, but can be more deeply ingrained in attitudes, values, and stereotypical beliefs. In some cases, these are unconsciously held and have become deeply embedded systems and institutions that evolve over time. Racism operates at a number of levels, in particular, individual, systemic, and societal. Despite the fact that Canada had made much progress, unfortunately, racism and racial discrimination remain a persistent reality of Canadian society. Here is their takeaway line, the Ontario Human Rights Commission. This fact that racism remains a persistent reality in Canadian society must be acknowledged and becomes the starting point to effectively address racism and racial discrimination. And so I'm just going to repeat a few things that Greg says. The recent uprising in the US and the death of George Floyd brought to surface to our society that has tolerated and ingrained racism in all its form, whether overt or systemic. This single event is not unique, but is an amalgam of evils that Black people have endured over hundreds of years in America and the rest of the world. In Canada, although a better society, we nevertheless have significant issues that needs to be addressed and addressed quickly to prevent similar uprising in one of the greatest countries of the world. As a person of faith who believes in the Lord Jesus Christ, I represent a message that the Lord himself came to deliver to all humanity. This message of hope breaks down all barriers and make all human beings love and live in peace and harmony and respect. This is the antithesis of racism. Our commitment to serve all humanity at Meadowvale East through various programs, whether it's a weekly food bank, bi-weekly food bank program, weekly senior event, annual summer camps, bi-weekly group home visit, low-income subsidized rental, are just examples of how we resonate the message of the Lord Jesus Christ. Most people know what racism is and are acutely aware of its status, from the workplaces to schools to our parliaments and even our most intimate places or homes. I can liken racism in some ways to COVID-19. It has no barriers, no limits, no gender, no age limit, and most importantly, it spawned very quickly if left unchecked. Thus, as a Black person in this town hall tonight, I hope I've been given an opportunity to point out to our leaders what we need to do, how we can do it, and for them to do it now. Just to close, I want to quote from Dr. Martin Luther King in his message, I Have a Dream speech on the 28th of August 1963. He says, I quote, "We have come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children." Now, we got an opportunity, and Greg said it earlier, now we have the chance. Thank you, and we'll talk later.
Thank you, Pastor. Yes, definitely. Now is the time to talk about what we can do going forward, and now is the time to listen. With this, we will pass the floor to a young leader. He's not a leader of tomorrow, but he's a leader of today, Omer Mumish, and I have seen very closely all what he has been doing as a student and what he has been doing in this Scarborough community to build a better and a diverse Canada. So over to you, Omer.
Thank you, Sister Salma. So, hi everyone. First of all, my name is Omer Mumish, and I am a grade 10 student at Ethnicity, a French-speaking high school here in Scarborough. I am a proud Black Muslim Canadian, and this afternoon I am really delighted to be included in this town hall discussion, which will focus on systemic racism in Canada and what we can all do to make a change. By the way, this is my very first town hall participation. I am a bit nervous, so please bear with me. A heartfelt and warm thank you to my MP Salma Zahid and all her friends, all her friendly staff, whom I consider friends and family, and allowing me to volunteer and to be part of the 2019 re-election campaign. Here's the thing. When you are given an opportunity such as this one for a young Black person like myself, it's really a great deal, and I can even consider it as life-changing, because it's not every day that you see this kind of opportunity. So for that, thank you, Salma.
You're most welcome, Omar, and look forward to your input into what we need, what we all need to do, because I think the perspective which our youth can provide us going forward, I think is really very important, and our youth need to be listened. And being a mother of two young men now, a 20 and a 22-year-old, I think we all work hard every day for a better future for our next generation. So it's important that we listen to our youth and involve them in our discussions and in formulating policies going forward. So as we tackle this topic of systemic racism, I think all of us might have faced racism at one point or the other. I'm a woman of color, an immigrant who came to Canada in search of a better future. And the journey of the last 21 years has been really amazing. And Canada has provided me so many opportunities, and where I am today and what I am today, it's all about, and I owe this to Canada. I owe my life to the healthcare of Canada, and what all I have achieved for myself and my family, it's because of the opportunities which are available for everyone, regardless of who you are and from where you are. But at the same time, I have been a target of racism few times. When I started wearing a hijab back in 2018, I was attacked on the social media that why, and I'm doing that. So I stood up to fight against it, because I feel that it is really very important that for all women and for all young girls, it's their choice what they want to wear and what they don't want to wear. So no one should be able to dictate it to them that what they should wear and what they should. My elder son, when he was in grade 7 at a local school, was told that, oh, you are a terrorist. So there have been few instances, and all of us have faced through it. But today, as we tackle this, there are few questions, I think, which we need to look into and see what we can do. So does systemic racism exist in Canada, and how would we really define it? So I think we have come a long way here in Canada, but systemic racism still exists in Canada. And now is the time that we tackle this and define a path going forward. So I will open this discussion and ask each one of you to provide your input in an answer to this question. Is there systemic racism in Canada, and how would you define it? So we can start with Greg. Greg, if you can start with this question.
It's an excellent question, Salma. So what is systemic discrimination? It really is can be described as unconscious bias. It means very few people are racist, but we all have these biases, these things that we think of. For example, if I were just to say to maybe not Omer because he's younger and he's more with it, but to Pastor McGann and to you, Sam, if I said, well, today I saw my doctor, went for an appointment. Most people in their heads will think of a man, even though my doctor has been for most of my life, my family doctor has been a female. So, but that is an unconscious bias. We have this image in our head. And with that unconscious bias, we make certain decisions, although each decision we can make might be justified. When you add up all those decisions, you get a really wonky result. So let me give a real world example. Blacks and Indigenous peoples are no more likely to commit a crime than any other non-Indigenous or non-Black person. Studies have shown this. Yet, Black people are arrested more often, convicted, get harsher penalties, and find themselves in jails 3 to 4 times their demographic weight in the population. If you think that's bad, when you take a look at Indigenous people, as I said, they're not more likely to commit a crime. But if you focus on them, what you end up having is a situation where 8 times their weight in the population can be found in our federal prisons. That then really makes us ask a really tough question. What's going on? What's that unconscious bias? What's that systemic discrimination that's at work that leads to those terrible results of seeing young Blacks and young Indigenous people being incarcerated, being put in jail more often? So that's what systemic discrimination is.
Absolutely right. We will, Pastor, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, Greg raised a very interesting points, but I also have to give an actual experience I had 2 years ago coming back from London Heathrow via Air Canada. I was in the elite line where you get access to either the lounge or personal aircraft. And while waiting in line, a white person who was one of the at the gate came and told me, I don't belong to that line. I'm sorry, you don't belong to that line. I said, pardon me? And he says, you have to leave, you have to go to the next line because you don't belong here. And I said, I am elite member. I've flown in Air Canada and I have elite status for the last 20 years. I've flown 100,000 miles or so in Air Canada. He still would not, and he almost created a big hassle there because he discriminated against me because he thought because my color, I could never be an elite member. And so that is the sort of inequitable experiences that we as Black people experience. Other examples are when my daughter was studying, her guidance counselor told her that you can't be anything else but a nurse because we know Black people are good at nursing. A third one is when my young boy was in school, I think it was grade 4, grade 3, his teacher told him that in front of myself when we went for the parent review, you will never come to nothing because based on your behavior, you will never come to anything. That very same day, I told the teacher that's the last day my son would attend that school. Now, if I didn't have the experience and the knowledge, I would have had a complete bad experience with my child because they did not know that Black people or children of Black people, grandchildren of Black people were being treated unfairly by a system that rejected a person based on their color and not what their skills and competencies are. And lastly, I want to just quote just this week. There's an article in the Toronto Star by Royston James about Chiquita Arua, who graduated valedictorian of our class of 259. She was the only Black in the class that graduated and valedictorian, and as a result of that, she became a victim of vitriolic hate messages because she was valedictorian. That's one thing. But if she was the only Black of a class, there's something wrong with our society. And as a result of our advocacy work, she now caused the next batch of cohort or med school to be not 1, but 28 and 27 because of our work. So these are, if we're going to make progress, we need advocates who will be strong and support our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors, our community members to recognize where it is and weed it out. So yes, it exists, and we have examples of it.
Thank
Sorry
you.
to be so long-winded.
No. Thank you, Pastor, and thank you for sharing some of the experiences you have come across. I think it's really very important for community members to listen to your experiences, and this is really something that we all have faced, and this is a reality existing in our community. So, Omer, would you like to add to this topic?
Yes. So I strongly do believe that there is a systemic racism in Canada. And first, I would like to define systemic racism as discrimination based on race and ethnicity. And it takes many forms. For example, the discrimination in the housing sectors or in employment, where we see a high number of refugees and immigrants being employed in low-income jobs. As a student, another form of discrimination I see is in the content of our handbooks, where there is a huge representation of white story versus the black story. And on a day-to-day basis, what I see is that the people that are in charge or in power at my school are mostly white individuals, like school principal, or my janitor, or the administration, mainly occupied by minorities or black people. So yes, I do believe that there's systemic racism in Canada.
Thank you, Umar. One other issue which all of us have been hearing a lot in the last few days is about defunding the police. And this is an issue which is being discussed. So we would really like to hear from you that what does that mean? And we also have a question from one of the participants today, that from Jamal Myers, that what do the panelists think of calls to defund the police? So we will start with Greg. What does that mean, and what should happen?
Yeah, I think what it means is that it could mean a wide range of things, but what most people mean by defunding the police is to take away resources, financial resources, from the police that would normally be used to increasingly militarize police, and to redirect that money to providing social services or mental health services. What's a terrible thing has really developed a bad habit that we've had here in Canada, and I'd even say North America, is that we've tried to make the police officer do everything. So not only to enforce the municipal regulations and the laws that we have, and to ensure that people are safe, but also to be the person who's going to, take the cat down from the tree, or to help counsel somebody who might be suffering from mental health issues, or to help to try to deal with a whole bunch of social, economic things that really are not relevant to the police. They're more relevant to social workers, to mental health workers, to to counselors. That's what's probably needed a lot more often than having somebody who is armed to show up at somebody's door, because it's like the old joke with the hammer. To a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if you're trained to use lethal force, then almost every problem seems to be, you might want to resolve it using that way, as opposed to saying, look, here's a marital dispute going on. No one has a gun or a knife in the house, but they're yelling at each other, risk of violence. Well, then maybe you need to bring in a social worker to come in and try to de-escalate what's happening. So what we need to do, because, and I say this with all due respect to the women and men who serve in our police forces, but I think that we need a lot more we need other factors to come play, or other people to come help our society, than just having police forces always being asked to do everything under the sun, because we get some really tragic results when we go down that route. And in Toronto, you just recently had another case. Perhaps it would have been better to send somebody who was a trained professional in mental health issues, and rather than sending armed police to deal with, which could have saved. We don't know what the situation is, but perhaps would have had a result different than the one that we had, which led to the death of that young woman.
No, definitely. I think mental health is something we definitely need to invest more, and our government in the last 5 years has invested. But Greg, I think you wanted to say?
Well, I just want to say one of the things that I did when I first became an MP, we have the right as members of Parliament to go when we want to visit a prison, a federal prison, or to visit a military base. And so I took advantage of that right to go visit a prison. And so I went to a maximum security prison, and a medium one, and a minimum one. And I could tell you one thing. The overrepresentation is real of Indigenous and Black people. But also another thing that in speaking to the warden is that a lot of these people, frankly, just needed mental health issues, or they might have had a drug, a bad drug trip, but they ended finding themselves being brought in by police. And prisons are just, I'll tell every young person, no one wants to go to prison. They're terrible places. We don't rehabilitate people very well, and if you can, avoid it. So we should set up our system in a way that we can avoid it, and that means not having. If the term is defunding police, then that means putting other resources at work, not police resources, because that just leads to criminalizing people who have mental health issues or have drug issues, and those are not necessarily the people who at one point would have been menaces to society.
Thank you, Greg. Pastor, would you quickly like to add to it?
I think I could spend a long time speaking about this, but Greg succinctly, clearly captured the response, because defunding right now is the new fad word coming from America, and we don't really know or understand the context of how that is being used, whether in Minneapolis or California. But in its truest sense, we have to somewhat contextualize what it means. What defunding should be is what Greg said rightly. We need to reallocate or proportionalize the resource funding to what is needed for the population at large. If we need more funding for mental health, why send in 2 heavily armed, highly paid police officers, and sometimes with overkill forces for someone who cannot respond or is not armed? It makes sense to send in someone who will train and can de-escalate the situation and get a better outcome. So if that's what defunding really means, yes, defunding should be. We should look at every single police budgets in every cities in our country and look at it. What does the budget do, and what is it there to do to cater to the needs of the community in every aspect? And I think we're a better utilization of our resources rather than trying to bring in more police with bigger guns and better equipped armored cars to take down somebody who's mentally ill or someone with a drug problem. So defunding need to be put in the right context, and if that's the context it needs, then we have to start looking at it, not tomorrow, not next week, but like now.
No, yeah, that is thing. It is the important thing is that things need to start happening now. So we will quickly provide Omer the opportunity to add to it before we move to the next topic. Yes.
So thank you, Salma. So it was only recently that I have been introduced to the term defunding the police. The defunding the police movement has resurfaced amid the protest and the brutal murder of George Floyd. Defunding the police means diverting money from the police budget and put it towards other services, like, for example, social services, mental health programs, and community policing. Personally, it's a model that really sits well in securing a much more promising future, because how I see things, the police has always been an intimidating figure for Black people. Now, if we divert the budget towards other services and programs, we will have more trained people in de-escalating situations or even dealing with mental health crises.
Thank you, Omer. And one important question which has come just now is from Abraham Walker. Abraham Walker has joined us today, and the question is: as a young Black male, I am scared to wear my hoodie while walking at night or driving because of recent events. Why is this? How can we fix or change this? Why am I scared when I see a police officer? Isn't their job to serve and protect? This is a topic which I have heard and had conversations with our young people at many doors in my riding, and I think it is really very important question. We all need to put our heads together and see why is that and what we can do. So maybe we will provide opportunity to Omer first to answer this question. So Omer, to you, what do you feel and what do you think should be done to tackle this issue?
Okay, so as you may have noticed, I am a young person myself, and if my mother ever caught me with the police, she would flip out. But joke aside, I have learned from my family and friends many tips. The first thing is that by any means, not to get involved with the police. Try to avoid the police. The second tip I have learned is that to try to be polite but not ignorant. Being informed on your rights plays a huge part. The third tip is not to make them feel unsafe or threatened, because it only takes one bad move and they're on top of you or pointing a gun at your face. So never make any useless sudden moves and always keep your hand visible at all times. As final tip, and something that is always controversial in the society and brings a lot of stereotypes about Black folks, like the physical appearance overall, like avoiding unkept hair, low riding, or even hoodies, which can be perceived as an artistic and cultural expression for Black people, but threatening to the police.
Thank you, Omer. Pastor McGann, would you like to?
That's quite interesting, because that's probably a segue to the next question. What do you tell your children about interacting with police? And I in my written response, I say what I tell my children and what I expect all parents to tell their children: to be respectful, to be mannerable, to follow the rules. That's what I expect not only a Black parent to tell their children, but a white person or Italian or indigenous. Respect and order is part of how society conducts itself. So I expect the parents to teach their children. So I would tell my children, I told my children that always be respectful. If you stop by a police, good afternoon, good morning. What can I do for you? What is the reason? And don't try to be resistant or try to be belligerent, because they are structural authority ordained by the government to keep society in order. They have to respect it. And so that's what I will expect all parents. So my children should never be intimidated because of a policeman. On the other hand, my expectation for police is that they will not intimidate my children because of who they are. And in the majority of time, to my experience, I have found out that most police in Toronto that I've encountered are very respectful. They're the odd one who are belligerent and rude and nasty. But if I believe respect garners respect. If you're respectful, they will. Now, There's always exception to the rule, and I see, and you know, but that doesn't require the police force to be brutal, to be nasty, and with an intent to kill or destroy or maim Black people for who they are.
Thank you, Pastor. Greg, what would you suggest as a parent and as an elected representative? What would be your advice, and what do you think we as elected representatives can do so that our youth don't go out with a fear in their mind? They don't live with that fear.
That's a tough question, Sama. So first of all, let me just say to Omar and to Pastor McGann, both those answers were just bang on, perfect. The problem is that you could have 90%. My interactions with the police have been very cordial and very proper, but I think I follow the advice that Omer's mom gave her. You be accommodating but not ignorant. So you have to know your rights. But that being said, we've seen examples, and I hate to focus in on the few examples, but those are the ones that we hear about, of some police officers profiling us because of the color of our skin, assuming the worst of us because we're color of our skin, not cutting us that little bit of slack and giving us a bit of an opportunity, to just think, oh well, they're fine. Frankly, to think the worst of us because of the color of our skin. So, in a sense, I'm not certain if I could say that people should go out and embrace police without fear. I think I guess we have to be intelligent about our fear. We have to try to keep it within check, and we have to follow the advice that Omer's mother gave to be respectful, but not a pushover, and really hope that works. But I have to tell you, I was so put out by that video of that Minnesota detective putting the knee on the neck of that of Mr. Floyd. It made me think that, wow, no matter what we do or say, some people don't care, and that's not a good thing, especially when we as a society have given these few people the right to carry a weapon and to enforce the peace, or to ensure that there is a peaceful relations. That comes with a huge responsibility, and this one police officer really set back the reputation of police forces. Has really damaged them incredibly. So I guess my advice would be, just try not to put yourself in a situation where they would even stop you.
So just one quick Zalma. I just wanted to say that the responsibility that we give our police officers come with some sense of accountability. And one way of keeping them accountable is that we have to have a universal plan that all police officers carry a body camera, so that we can keep check of their activity and their actions at any time, day or night. That is one method, and I heard it being proposed to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau earlier this week or last week, that body cam should be mandatory for every police officer in every jurisdiction across Canada. That's one way of holding them accountable for their action 24/7 or whenever they're on the job. So you can take that back to your fellow MPs, that citizens are requesting that we hold these police officers across all regions accountable through body cams.
Thank you, Pastor, and thank you for your input on this. We have so many issues and we have so many questions coming in, but we are running out of time. And I think this is a topic which we can talk for hours. And but I think because we are running out of time, I will ask each one of you to provide your input. What needs to be done going forward? What can we do as an elected representatives? What can people do in the community? And what can governments do? So I will start with Pastor McGann to provide your input that what needs to be done in the community, what can be done by the community members, what can be done by the government here in Canada, so that we can build a more diverse Canada.
Thank you, Salma, except it's going to take me 3 hours to give you some of the recommendations. But I try to be brief.
You can summarize in 3 minutes.
So I was fortunate. Somebody sent me a clip of a famous writer or speaker. His name is Baratun Force. He does a talk show, and it's about how to deconstruct racism one headline at a time. And I'll provide the link with you to you afterwards, anybody. And he says that he states all systemic abuse of power have a structure. That's what makes them systemic. Governments needs to create safe places for Black and brown people to tell about their experience. It's not just being safe or advisable, but in everyday racial prejudice and everyday microaggression, we need to give people space to talk about it. And when they talk about it, they give an opportunity, they provide an outlet for people to understand. That's what governments can do. What we can do as a society, we have to seize this moment. We have to seize up. Now is the time, as I said earlier. We have to seize this moment. We should not let this just be another study. I would have quoted from a study was done by Roy McMurphy and Minister, one of the government under Dr. McGann, who created a commission to study the Earl Manor shooting in 2007. Their recommendations are still sitting on the shelf somewhere in Queen's Park. It's been studied and studied. So now what can community do? We need to stand up and say, we're holding our government accountable. We want action, and we want it now. We will not allow this thing to die out. We're going to seize the moment. We're going to move on this one. At the community level, I think we got work to do. We as preachers and teachers and leaders, we have our job to provide, be the real mentors where young people, Black young people, Indigenous young people, Muslim young people have come to us and say, tell us, how do we navigate the various things we face in life? How can we overcome these challenges? How can we make better people? How can I overcome the odds against me when I go to my guidance counselor and say, you cannot be a doctor, but you can be a mechanic. You cannot be a lawyer because you're great. How we as a community, we can do our best by being mentors, guidance counselors to supplement what they get and in sometimes not supplement, but become the prime guidance counselors to our young people. Because as you said, Zalma, you overcame several odds. Greg did, Omer's a young person, and I did. How can we be their mentor to help them navigate the problem they find in a very systemic racial society?
Thank you, Pastor. I think you have pointing us in a right direction. And whenever I have discussions with our youth in the community, and I always tell them, dream big. This is Canada, and if you work hard, you can achieve anything. Never ever feel that you can't do this or you can't do that. Always dream big and determine a path going to achieve that dream. So, Omer, what would you say that what should we do as a community? What should we do as community members, and what should governments do to
Thank you, Salma.
replace?
So first, I think the government plays a big part in eradicating this plug. First of all, is acknowledging the systemic racism that is embedded within the Canadian society. Creating and supporting many Black targeted programs in the community would be another idea. Making sure the younger generation is informed and is aware of their history as Black individuals in the educational level. Policy change is another way to go, making the economy Black friendly and accessible to Black owned entrepreneurs, bringing some change in the school's curriculums, and defunding the police, obviously. The community also plays an equal, if not bigger role than the government in this problem. Showing your support to each other and being the voice for the oppressed is one way. Supporting Black owned businesses, creating alliances with the indigenous people and other minorities, acknowledging that we all live on stolen lands of the indigenous people, active community engagement when it comes to Black issues. And for future, and as Pastor Melvin said, paving the way for the next generation of politicians, policymakers, and so forth, making sure that the minority groups are always included at the table, offering more grants and scholarships for students from the low-income groups, knowing that they are mostly Black people or minority groups. School curriculum should include leadership programs at a young age, creating an exclusive body dealing with police brutality and discrimination cases other than the Human Rights Commission. So that's my point of view on the government and community's roles.
Thank you, Omer, and you are definitely leader of today. And we look forward to a day when you would be occupying the seat in the House of Commons on behalf of Scarborough Centre.
I hope so too.
And thank you, Omer. So, Greg, over to you now.
I don't know how to follow that, Slava. I mean, I think we're seeing our a future prime minister right here in the making. I think, Omer, you literally took the words out of my mouth. I think this requires a full societal. We got to do a whole big rethink. How do we support each other? How do we create an inclusive society? And what role should the police play in that? And as a result, are we giving the right resources, doing the right activities for our police, or do we need to think about putting other, and all the things that we can do? Where do we choose to put our resources to create safe societies? To combat systemic discrimination requires not only the change of laws, not only the change of structures, but I think Pastor McGann said it requires a change of the heart. It requires us to see each other, to really see each other as people, as equals, as children of God, and to see ourselves as brothers and sisters. And that if we can allow people to live their lives fully and freely, your happiness is my gain. And I know that sounds all very, poetic, but it's really a way that we have to take a look at how do we do this. But if we keep on setting these barriers to confrontation, look, I don't see how we get anything better than what we have now. And so why should we continue to doing the things that we know that are not working, that has led to systemic discrimination, has led to people being killed by the people who should be protecting us, by having people who don't resemble us feel further and further apart as opposed to closer and closer together. So we need a real complete rethink as to how we need to do this. And I think these videotaped deaths, these videotaped brutal acts of racism allows us this opportunity now to really give ourselves a big rethink.
Thank you, Greg. And I think, yes, definitely we need to rethink, and we need to start taking action now. We have done many studies over decades, and we have looked into many reports, but I think now is the time to take a step forward. And with that, I think we will end. And it was really an amazing discussion today. And thank you to all three of you for joining this and contributing to this discussion, that what needs to be done going forward. So definitely I think we all can work together to build a better Canada for everyone. Diversity is one of our biggest strengths here in Canada, but still I think it's important that we listen now and take actions so that we can even build a more prosperous Canada for our future generations, and especially for Omer.
Yes, and Zalma,
Yeah,
if
thank
I
you.
could just quickly just say, someone sent me today, a friend of mine, as a matter of fact, a relative of mine, sent me a 30-page document. I think it's about 30-page document that was prepared by the United Nations General Assembly, a report of the working group of experts on the people of Canada of African descent on its mission to Canada. They came to Canada for about 5 days, and they went from coast to coast, and they prepared a report with 30 recommendations. And when I looked through these recommendations, they're nothing different than we have said today. They said it differently. If the government of Canada or Ontario or Municipal Toronto will work in a few of these, I think a lot can be done to get rid of systemic racism.
We're on it.
You got it?
We're on it.
Okay, I can provide it to Zalma. Somebody sent it to me. I'll send it to anybody on the live chat would like to get a copy of it. I can send it to Zalma, and I'm amazed that they did this such a great in 2016 and presented the government of Canada, and it's in the shelf somewhere in Ottawa.
No, it isn't.
I
I have to tell you, and I have to just give this story.
Okay, good. Thank you.
They tried, this is the UN Decade for People of African Descent. It was declared from 2014 to 2024. In 2014, the United Nations wanted to send a panel to Canada. The government of the day, the previous government, would not allow that group of panelists to come to Canada to do their study. It was only after Salma and I got into government that our government opened the door to allow them to come in. They came in 2016, they made the report, and in 2017, in fall of 2017, they made the report. By the beginning of 2018, the Prime Minister recognized the existence of anti-Black racism. He talked about systemic discrimination. He put money into the budget for the first time in Canada's history that it was directed at Black Canadians, especially on the issue of mental health, also disaggregating data. In 2019, again, even more money directed towards the Black population, this time on supporting community organizations. We know that there's still a lot of work to do. Salma and I both sit on the Black Caucus, and we are working with that report. So it's not on a shelf somewhere. It is actually being actively used so that we can make sure that we can change things for the better, so that not only does our generation do well, but especially Omer's generation will prosper.
Greg, I would appreciate if you could somehow send me a link to where all the actions have been taking place. I'd be very happy to see that. Thank you, Zalma. Appreciate it for giving me the time to mention this.
No, we will do that. And thank you, Greg, for providing more information to that. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to all the participants who joined us today for this discussion tonight. And we will continue with our Facebook Live every week. Next week, we will be doing a Facebook Live on Friday rather than a Thursday, because June 19th is a day which we were scheduled to do a seniors fair. So we will be doing a virtual seniors fair this year from 10 to 11 a.m. on Friday, June 19th. So hope all of you will join us for that discussion as we see what we can do and what we are doing in this community to help our seniors. With this, we will end tonight's discussion. I will again thank our panelists for joining us tonight. To all the viewers, if you need any information in regards to federal issues or the programs which are available to tackle this pandemic, please feel free to get in touch with my office either through email or through a phone call. We are here to serve you, and hope all of you will have a great evening. Stay safe, keep healthy, take care of yourselves. Please follow the public health advice. We have come a long way, but still we are not out of the woods as a country and as a province, as a city. So continue following the public health advice and keep your loved ones safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Zalma. Appreciate it.
Thank you.